There seems to be a trend with my videos lately. What is that trend? I'll give you one guess. It starts with A. Aardvark. Yep, you guessed it. Hello guys, how are you? David Franco here from davidfranco.com. It's always linked right below in case you don't know what I'm saying. Sometimes I just like to talk fast. And no, today's video is not about an aardvark. What the frig would I talk about an aardvark for? A-A-R-D-V-A-R-K. Arthur, anyone? I always think of Arthur when I think of aardvarks. Okay, so today's video is about Apple, not aardvark. And yesterday's video was about Apple. So yeah, you see that trend? I just love Apple. I'm not a fanboy, but I'm definitely biased towards them. I almost always prefer to go the Apple routes rather than the competition because I believe in them. The Apple ecosystem is incredibly powerful. And if you're not part of the Apple ecosystem, then I cannot expect you to understand why Apple users are so passionate. The fact that my iPhone works with my Mac works with my iPhone, my iPad works with my iPhone, my iPad works with my Mac, my watch, which isn't on me right now because it's updating to watchOS 4, they all work together. And guys, honestly, that is a huge deal. So it got me thinking, what is my history with Apple? What is my early history with Apple? Well, grab a cup of coffee, grab a snack, grab a beer, whatever, and enjoy. So this video is all about my early history with Apple. I'm not gonna go through every single product, every single experience I've had with Apple, because that would honestly take at least a couple hours because I love Apple that much. They're not perfect. Trust me, I'm not saying they're perfect. They're actually far from perfect. They have a lot of improving to do, especially in recent years, but they are still by far my favorite company out there. I just love what they do. So going way back, let's talk about my history regarding Apple and how I felt about them even before I knew who or what Apple was all about. Now, how does that make sense? Well, listen, here we go. Years ago, when I was just a little kid in our old house, this is back in, what, the 90s, I used to always go to the local library. This is before we had like a good computer. Yeah, we had a computer here and there, but there was something about using the computer at the library. It was just better, especially for Yahoo chat rooms. Age, sex, location, anyone? But even before then, I was always using this computer at this square desk that was put there for kids, because keep in mind, I was just a kid back then, and I would use that computer to look up books and where to find those books in that library. And now and then I would see like a little watch icon pop up, and I didn't know what it was. Okay, so yeah, it meant the screen was loading. It was loading some kind of program or operation or whatever. But as a kid, I would always see that watch icon. And then years later, it kind of clicked with me. Once I became a Mac user, I once again saw that watch icon. And guys, actually, I'll put that right there. I'm pretty sure that's the icon I was talking about. It's like a little cursor. And it clicked with me when I was using, I think at the time, maybe my iMac G3 running macOS 9. I saw that watch icon and it kind of just clicked. I was like, whoa, hold on. So I was using a Mac as a little kid years ago, and that just kind of blew my mind. Even back then, I was kind of a Mac user without even realizing it. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Probably boring as hell to you guys, but it's just fun for me to put this stuff out there to look back on someday. So yes, anyway, I was using a Macintosh without even realizing it. And then at some point in the future, I have an extremely vague memory of using maybe an iMac or something running OS 10 or maybe even OS 9 at the time at Circuit City, maybe? And my dad was like, no, you don't want to use that. It's not Windows. Or he said something like, no, that's not what we like to use, or that's not, I don't know. Like I said, it's an incredibly vague memory. So even back then, I was using a Mac. David, Steffu, let's get to the good stuff. I just thought that was interesting. Okay, so fast forwarding a few years. The first iPod I ever got was the iPod 3rd generation. And I got that for Christmas. Right here. Yes, my first iPod ever. There wasn't even a click wheel. This was a scroll wheel. It didn't click. It tapped because there were no physical buttons on this thing except for the hold switch, which was neat. But yeah, so back then when I didn't know what Apple was, this is kind of like a gift I asked for and I forgot about it, and I opened it and I was amazed by the build quality. I was just baffled, but in a good way. And I just could not believe how much quality and attention to detail went into a single product. Now keep in mind, I never used anything like this back in the day. So at the time, like I said, it blew my mind. You had a little backlight behind these buttons. Again, buttons, just touch sensitive. And it was like an orange backlight, and it just looked so cool. Scrolling through your music was something unheard of back then. And it was just incredible. Just an incredible experience, and a 30GB hard drive. So that in itself is a pretty big deal. Okay, so fast forwarding a couple years after that, I got this for my birthday, which will always be my favorite iPod of all time, the iPod 5th generation 60GB hard drive. This is the first iPod ever that supported video. And Steve Jobs famously said himself, nobody wants to watch video on a small screen. So just keep that in mind for the future and for the past whenever you think, oh, Apple said they would never do this. Apple said they would never do that. I mean, guys, don't forget, Apple's a marketing company. They like to sell ideas. At first, they make you think you don't need something, and then they're like, you need this. So iPod video is a great example, and the Apple Pencil is a great example because Steve Jobs, once again, said himself during the iPhone keynote in 2007 that nobody wants to use a stylus. Fast forwarding to recent years, and what do we have? Not a stylus on the iPhone, but a stylus on the iPad Pro. So in other words, the Apple Pencil, which is incredible. So yeah, anyway, the iPod 5th generation will always be my favorite iPod of all time. Click wheel worked beautifully. The buttons up here were gone because they were integrated into the click wheel itself. Watching videos on this thing was actually really cool. I'll never forget Apple heavily marketed the iPod video alongside YouTube, like an actual YouTube concert music video type of promotion thing. And this was back when video podcasts were new. I'll never forget, I used to listen to this podcast, I forget the name already, but I would always listen to the audio version, and then when the video version came out, I was like, so that's what the co-hosts look like. Like, it's always a weird feeling when you hear someone's voice, and then you see what they look like. So, just thought that was interesting to me. So yeah, awesome iPod. And the iPod Shuffle 2nd generation, which does say I, David on the back. I don't think these are engraved. No. This one is engraved. My favorite iPod Shuffle of all time. I used this at college a lot. My first college for computer graphic arts. That's my first degree. I'll talk about that in a bit. You could clip it on your backpack, your shirt, your pants, whatever. And this one is better than the current iPod Shuffle, in my opinion, because there's more room for your thumb to click. The new one is much more square, and you have to be careful to not click the side button. So yeah, I love this thing. Okay, where am I at on my notes? Okay, let's talk about the Mac. And yes, I have notes on here just so I don't forget anything. Hey guys, I warned you, this video is gonna be long. I mean, come on. I love Apple, so I'm gonna put the time in. Let's talk about the Mac. Like I said, computer graphic arts was my first major in college. I went to a local community college, which saved me a ton of money. So yeah, I mean, I went for graphic design. And I'll never forget the first time I went to my night class at 6:00 p.m. Just a detail that I'll never forget. I was early, along with most of the other students, and my professor, maybe she was late that night, I forget that part. But we were standing outside of the Mac lab, and it was locked, for obvious reasons, theft and whatever. I mean, it wasn't a bad area, but they just locked the classroom, because they can. And while I recall peeking into the classroom like this, and seeing PowerMac G4 Quicksilvers like all over the place with these beautiful plastic Apple Cinema displays. Okay, so at the time, I didn't know they were called G4s. I didn't know they were codenamed Quicksilver. I didn't know the displays were called Cinema displays. But I'll never forget when I was looking through the glass, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna be using these for my design work? This is incredible. And keep in mind, I was not a Mac user back then. So at the time, I was just in awe, I guess you could say. Okay, so eventually the professor gets there. We're all sitting down during our introductions. We see what the class is about, and I'm sitting there at the G4 just playing around with the thing and thinking, wow, this thing is beautiful. And keep in mind, the cinema display back then was plastic. Nowadays, Apple will never be caught dead making an all plastic product. Okay, technically it wasn't all plastic because of the display panel, but anyway, I just recall being amazed. And I was exploring, like everything was opposite. On Windows, the taskbar is on the bottom, but on the Mac, the menu bar is on the top, and the dock is on the bottom. There was no right click, you had to control click, which back then I was like, this is kind of weird, but it's something I quickly got used to. There was no scroll wheel on the mouse, which was definitely annoying, but eventually they came out with the Mighty Mouse. What a great mouse. Not really. Well, it was okay for the most part until that little ball stopped working. But yeah, so like everything was genuinely interesting to me. I was just playing around, exploring Mac OS, I think 10.2 Jaguar at the time. And then I became ignorant. I will never forget my professor was doing some kind of demonstration on screen explaining how to do something, and I was making or drawing something on the computer saying think straight instead of think different. Yes, back then I, David Franco, was an ignorant Windows fanboy who would not accept what Apple had to offer. And guys, that ties in directly with yesterday's video. Do not let fanboyism blind you. I cannot stand blind fanboys. So it's just funny to think about. Yes, I used to say think straight instead of think different, but deep down, I didn't hate the Mac. I didn't hate Apple. It was just new to me. And I guess I wouldn't fully accept the fact that it wasn't Windows. So I don't know, it was a very weird time for me. But I loved using the iMac G4 in the library because my mom and I used to take a class at the same time at 6 p.m. on Monday nights, and I used to wait for her until her class was done. And yeah, I would just chill in the library on the iMac G4, and I was just blown away by the design. Like, the monitor actually did this, and it did this, and it did that. It's just, you never saw anything like that from the Windows side of things, and that's why Apple was so interesting to me. But again, at the same time, I was dissing it in class, but in my own time, I was loving it. It was weird. It's like I wouldn't come out in an Apple way. Just very, very interesting to think about, and I kind of hate myself for that, but it's whatever. And that just goes to show you, over time, you quite literally do mature. You become a better person. You become more open-minded. Okay, so that can't be said for everybody, but let's hope you do. So then at some point, maybe a week or two later, my dad just randomly said, David, if you want me to buy you a PowerBook G4, or your first Mac, I forget the exact wordage, then I'll buy it for you and you can pay me back monthly. Because keep in mind, back then I didn't have a very good job. I was making what, $90, $100 a week? Not including tips. But still, I was a busboy, so I wasn't making a ton of money. But I was just so excited. I was like, okay, let's do this. So long story short, this isn't really short, but my dad bought me a PowerBook G4, 17-inch, right here. Oh my God, this thing is heavy. My first Mac ever for $2,800. Or maybe it ended up costing me $3,000, but I'm pretty sure it was $2,800. Look at this, 17-inch screen, huge speakers on the sides, small ass trackpad, very soft, like jelly-like keyboard. But back in the day, this thing was premium. I loved it, and I still do. Now granted, I haven't used it in years, and I feel bad. Eventually, I'll plug it in again. I mean, come on, it still has all the I/O. Everything's working. Actually, eventually the hard drive died, and you can hear it rocking because noobish me back then didn't install it completely correctly. Actually, no, I put an SSD. Yeah, I put an SSD to replace the hard drive, and ever since then, I've loved SSDs. They made a huge, huge difference. No, this doesn't have SSD. This is a regular hard drive, right? Yeah, it does. So I basically went from, I think, a 4,200 RPM hard drive to 7,200 RPM hard drive. Either that or 54 to 72. I just know I saw a massive difference in performance because, well, as you know, the faster you can read and write data, the faster it's going to perform for you, the user. So yes, PowerBook G4, my first official Mac. And like over time, I paid my dad back, but I'm pretty sure towards the very end of the cycle when I maybe owed $300, $200, whatever, my dad just kind of had me stop making payments and he took care of the rest, which I'm very grateful for, so thank you, Dad. But even then, I'm not sure. This is so long ago, I'm not sure of the exact details. I just know this is my first official Mac that I could call my own. But that's the thing. Even back when I got my PowerBook G4, I was still a big PC gamer. I was all about Half-Life 2 and Garry's Mod and Unreal Tournament and all that stuff. I loved gaming on my PC, a custom-built PC at that. I didn't technically build it myself. My friend built it for me, but I picked out all the parts and I kind of watched them. Because, well, back then it was my first gaming PC and I didn't want to screw it up. But I promise you, my next gaming PC, which I'll be building between October and November, I'm doing everything myself. So it's going to be a very cool learning experience. So yes, at the time, I was still gaming on my PC and using my PowerBook G4 occasionally. And I wasn't using it like I use my Mac nowadays. I mean, yeah, I use it for occasional graphic design work. I had like a Wacom tablet back then, or Wacom. But most interestingly enough, eventually something clicked with me. I'm like, wait a minute, why am I not downloading my BitTorrents on my PowerBook G4? Why not free up those resources from my PC, my Windows PC, and have my PowerBook G4 be like a dedicated BitTorrent machine? Okay, so nowadays, let me make something clear. I do not pirate software. So yeah, I mean, I do not condone piracy whatsoever. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I think everyone does it here and there. But in regards to Mac software, no, I just don't do that nowadays. Okay, where am I in my notes? Windows was my primary OS, and Mac OS X I used here and there. But I felt bad not using it as often as I should have because it cost me a lot of money. So then, one day, I just thought to myself, David, if you want to become a serious Mac user, you're going to need to push aside your PC. And keep in mind, I didn't completely push it aside, but I did do this. My PowerBook G4, I connected via DVI right there to my, at the time, Dell monitor. So basically, I had my PowerBook G4 connected, and this was sitting on a Griffin iCurve. Who remembers the iCurve? Back then, it was like one of the top accessories you could get for your Apple notebooks. It was just great, and I think I still have mine somewhere. Wait, no, or did I sell it on eBay? I went through like a big eBay phase years ago where I sold like everything, except for this, obviously, and other things. So yeah, I mean, I had my PowerBook G4 like kind of levitated on the iCurve with the display open, connected to the Dell display. So in a way, that was my first dual display setup ever, and I loved it. I will never forget, I had iTunes on here, like full screen, and on my main display, the Dell monitor, I would use for like video editing and Photoshop and all that stuff. The battery's dead. Yeah, obviously, I have to charge this thing. I haven't used it in a while. But at the same time, I was still using my PC occasionally, but over time, I just found myself never using my PC. It just sat there. So at some point in my life, I decided to put it in my closet and forget about it. And then at some point, fast forward maybe a year or two later, I eventually sold the parts on eBay. I sold the case on eBay, which I kind of regret. I would like to have that back to get into that again. I mean, I wouldn't use it that much, but I just want it in my possession. So I guess at that point, I went all in on the Mac, and I just loved my PowerBook G4. It quickly became my primary editing computer for iMovie, 2006. Remember iMovie HD? I used that for years because I recall hating iMovie 08. It was just terrible in my opinion. And then iMovie 09 made a lot of good fixes I liked, but it looked like iMovie 08, so I just sucked it up and I was like, David, just use iMovie 09. And ever since then, I never went back to iMovie HD, you know, 06. I don't think I did anyway. So from that point forward, I became obsessed with Apple, and some random notes I have here. I think I realized the true passion behind Apple when I witnessed the iMac G5 introduction video when Phil Schiller introduced it during the keynote. It just blew my mind. I'll never forget. They played a song by the Black Eyed Peas, like, let's get it started, you know, that song. And yes, I still like that song. Judge me, I don't care. But that song got me so hyped, like the editing, and I just couldn't believe like a company puts so much passion behind a single product reveal, I guess you could say. Because keep in mind, and yes, I'm saying that a lot, keep in mind, I never witnessed that from Windows. I mean, yeah, I liked gaming on my PC. I appreciated Windows for what it was, and I still do. But Microsoft never showed the kind of passion that Apple did. And I still think that's true today. I mean, yeah, Microsoft does show some passion behind products like the Surface and whatever, but I don't think they're nearly on the same scale that Apple is. And another experience, and I promise I'll wrap up this video in a few minutes, another experience I will never, ever forget. I went to New York City with my family, as I usually do, almost every year. And of course I had this behemoth with me, my PowerBook G4. And I took it to the Apple store in Soho. And guys, this is my first time visiting that store, so I wasn't even sure what to expect. I will never forget when I found it. I came upon these huge glass doors, you know, like the entrance. And I was thinking, these are some big ass doors. Is this the Apple store? I go in, I see the glass staircase, surrounded at the time by Macs and iPods and whatever. Then you go up that staircase, and there's a theater. There was an actual theater upstairs inside of a store based around technology. And guys, once again, I could not believe how much passion a single company represented behind their products. Just blew my mind. And it still blows my mind nowadays with some of Apple's stores. I mean, some of them are generic nowadays because they all look the same somewhat, but I'm talking about like the flagship stores, because Soho is definitely a flagship store. And I used to use my PowerBook G4. I used to go there by myself, just sit in the theater and take workshops and just chill. Use their Wi-Fi. I used to learn a thing or two about video and design and whatever. Like, it was a really, really cool experience. And again, you just can't get that from other companies. You just cannot. Okay, sure, there are other companies trying. Like, the Microsoft store is actually really nice, but come on, it looks like an Apple store. Right? Of course it does. My God, I sound like such a fanboy right now, but guys, it's the truth. And another experience I'll never forget is when I actually saw Steve Jobs in person. But what sucks about this is it was like a week or two before I got my camcorder for YouTube. So I was at the Apple Store, 5th Avenue, grand opening, you know, the glass cube. And I wasn't sure if Jobs was gonna be there. I saw David Pogue, I saw some other celebrities throughout the day, but the grand opening line quite literally wrapped around the block. And guys, this is New York City we're talking about. I'm not talking about Strasbourg, like a small building or whatever. This is New York City. Yes, the line wrapped around the building like crazy. And I think we waited, what, 5 to 7 hours to get to the front. But before we got in line, I saw Steve Jobs in the cube. Like, he was looking up, or he was outside of the cube or something, and he was with someone talking about the glass, or I don't know. Obviously I couldn't hear him. But then eventually, he came out. He was like right in front of me, maybe not further from where this TV is from me, like arm's length. And I'll never forget, I don't know the exact words, but I'll paraphrase. I could hear his voice, and he was like, "I want her," or "I want you." And he was pointing to his wife at the time, because she was getting out of a taxi or a limo, I don't know. And I hate myself for not having a camcorder. I hate myself for that. And now Steve Jobs has unfortunately passed, so I will never, ever have the opportunity again in my life to capture that. But fortunately, I had my Canon Rebel XT at the time, and I snapped some pictures. And if I can find those pictures on Facebook, I'll link them right below in the video description, so check them out. So yeah, that was another experience I'll never forget. I'm trying to think if anything else happened that day. Oh, and then later in the day, I was standing in line, and I saw Steve Jobs walking down the sidewalk with his wife, and I took out my camera as fast as I could, and I snapped pictures of him. And he actually tried to dodge my camera, which I thought was funny. But his wife was looking right at my camera, and she was smiling, which I thought was really cool. So yes, I did have a camera with me that day. It wasn't a camcorder, but at least it was a camera of some sort. So there's that. Then fast forwarding, eventually I got a huge upgrade with my first Mac Pro in 2007, and the rest is history. I love Apple. I do. I hate the fact that I used to be ignorant towards them with the whole think straight thing rather than think different. This chair needs adjusting, by the way. It's so noisy. It's a great chair though. I love it. But I guess that's what life is. I mean, you go through different stages in life. You act like an idiot. You learn from those mistakes, and you don't act like an idiot. Right? I mean, that's what life is all about, and that's exactly why I'm making today's video. Yesterday's video actually inspired today's video. And yes, guys, I fully realize I didn't talk about the iPhone. I didn't talk about the iPad. I didn't talk about my other iPods, which, by the way, if you want to see the iShrine video, check that out right below. That's my complete iPod and iPhone collection. I didn't talk about my experience with the Apple Watch, which again is not on me because it's installing watchOS 4 right now. And well, that's exactly why I titled this video, My Early History with Apple. And yes, I realize this video is going to be very long, but I didn't want to leave anything out. I mean, I'm sure I missed some things here and there, but I'm just proud to call myself an Apple user, an Apple fan. I really am. And I don't see myself changing that like anytime soon. I love Apple. I love what they represent. Not everyone can understand why people like myself are willing to pay a premium for their products. But if you're not part of the Apple ecosystem and you can't see how other products work with one another, then I can't expect you to understand why we pay a premium. I mean, some people might call us blind fanboys or sheep. That's not what we are. We're passionate. We love Apple. We love what they represent. But for people like me, that doesn't mean I'm suddenly blind to things like Windows or Samsung or Android. I'm not. Simply put, I prefer the Apple experience. So guys, thank you so much for watching. What are your Apple stories? Let me know right below. I'm curious. And I'll talk to you next time. Peace.